distance themselves from you. You may try to reach out, to understand, to fix the connection that is slipping away. But often you will find that the more you try, the further they withdraw. Because the issue was never about you in the first place. It was about what your existence reveals to them. And when people are not ready to face their own reflections, they will do everything they can to avoid the mirror. There is a reason why those who are truly confident, those who are secure in themselves, never feel the need to ignore or belittle others. They do not see growth as a competition. They do not feel the need to compare. They do not perceive someone else's success as a threat to their own. But the ones who do, they are the ones who struggle with their own sense of self. They are the ones who cannot stand to see someone else achieve what they told themselves was impossible. This is why people ignore you, not because you are unworthy, but because they are unready. Unready to face what your presence brings to light. Unready to admit that they have settled. Unready to embrace the fact that they too could change if they chose to. And so, rather than rising with you, they fade into the background, hoping to escape the discomfort of self-awareness. But you must remember, this is not your burden to carry. It is not your responsibility to dim your light so that others can remain comfortable in their shadows. You are not here to make others feel safe in their complacency. You are here to grow, to evolve, to become the person you are meant to be. And if that means losing people along the way, so be it. The right people, the ones who are secure, the ones who truly care, the ones who are not afraid of self-reflection, will never ignore you for becoming more than you once were. They will walk beside you, not behind you in resentment or ahead of you in competition, but beside you, in mutual respect and understanding. And those who cannot, they were never meant to walk your path to begin with. There is a kind of departure that happens not with words, not with conflict, not with any clear explanation, but with silence. One day, someone who was once a part of your life, someone who laughed with you, shared moments with you, made promises to you, begins to fade away. Their responses become shorter, their presence less frequent, and then eventually they are gone. No arguments, no warnings, no final conversations, just silence. At first you try to reason with yourself, maybe they are busy, maybe something happened in their life that is keeping them occupied. You give them the benefit of the doubt, you wait, you reach out. But as time passes, you realize the truth. This is not an accident. It is not a momentary distraction. It is a choice. They have chosen to step away, to remove themselves from your world without offering you the courtesy of an explanation. And this is what makes the silent goodbye the hardest to understand. The mind craves closure, it searches for reasons, it wants to know what went wrong, but there is nothing to hold on to, nothing to make sense of, just an empty space where once there was connection. You find yourself replaying memories, questioning your actions, wondering if there was a moment you missed, a mistake you made. You go through conversations in your head, looking for the turning point, the shift, the cause of their disappearance. But often, you find none. The truth is, people leave in silence for many reasons, and most of them have nothing to do with you. Sometimes they are dealing with battles they do not have the words to explain. Sometimes they have outgrown the relationship but do not know how to express it without hurting you. Sometimes they are simply afraid of confrontation, afraid of facing their own emotions, afraid of admitting that the connection is no longer what it once was. The silent goodbye is an act of avoidance. It is easier for them to disappear than to offer you the truth. It is easier to slip away than to have a difficult conversation. But that does not make it right, and it does not mean you deserve to be left in the dark. The absence of an explanation does not mean you were unworthy of one. It does not mean you were unimportant or that what you shared was meaningless. It only means that some people lack the emotional maturity or the courage to end things the right way. There is an undeniable pain that comes with being ignored, with being left without an answer. But the more you chase closure, the more you will find yourself trapped in a cycle of overthinking and self-doubt. Sometimes, the only closure you will ever receive is the understanding that their silence speaks louder than words ever could. Their absence is your answer. There is a lesson in the silent goodbye, though it is a painful one. It teaches you who is willing to stand beside you and who is not. It shows you the difference between those who value honesty and those who choose avoidance. And most importantly, it reminds you that you cannot force anyone to stay. No matter how much history you have, no matter how deeply you care, no matter how much you try to understand, people will leave when they want to. But here is what you must remember. When someone exits your life in silence, it is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of their way of handling relationships. If they valued you, they would have spoken. If they respected the connection, they would have acknowledged it. If they truly cared, they would have given you the truth, instead of disappearing into the shadows. It is easy to take it personally, to believe that if you had done something differently, they would have stayed. But the reality is, their decision was never about you. It was about them, their struggles, their fears, their inability to communicate, their need to move on without confrontation. And once you realize this, you free yourself from the weight of their silence. People who leave without explanation rarely return with one. They may come back someday when it is convenient for them, when they miss your presence, when they feel the absence of what you brought into their life. But by then, you will have learned something powerful. You do not need an apology to move forward. You do not need answers to find peace. You do not need their return to validate your worth. The silent goodbye may break you for a moment, but it will not define you. Because in the end, the people who truly matter, the ones who respect and cherish you, will never leave you wondering where you stand. They will never make you question your value. They will never choose silence when honesty is what you deserve. Human connections, whether friendships, relationships, or even professional bonds, often operate on an invisible scale of perceived value. People engage with you, respond to you, and prioritize you based on what they believe you bring into their lives. It is not always a conscious decision, but it happens nonetheless. And when someone suddenly starts ignoring you, it is often because, in their mind, the value you once provided has diminished. This is one of the harshest truths to accept. We want to believe that people stay in our lives because of loyalty, because of love, because of the connection itself. But in reality, most people stay as long as they feel there is something they are gaining, whether it is emotional support, companionship, inspiration, or even just the comfort of familiarity. When that shifts, so does their presence. The moment they believe they no longer need what you offer, they begin to withdraw. This is why relationships often change when circumstances change. A person who once relied on you for emotional support may start to ignore you once they have found someone else to confide in. A colleague who used to engage with you may distance themselves once they believe you no longer contribute to their success. Even friendships that once felt unbreakable can fade when one person's growth disrupts the dynamic that kept them connected. It is not necessarily out of malice, it is simply human nature. People assess relationships in terms of what they gain, often without realizing they are doing it. When someone stops responding, stops engaging, stops making the effort, they have, on some level, reassessed your place in their life. This does not mean you have no value. It simply means their perception has changed, and the dangerous trap you must avoid is trying to convince them otherwise. When you sense someone pulling away, there is often an instinct to chase, to prove your worth, to remind them of the role you play in their life, but doing so only places you in a position of weakness. If someone needs to be reminded of your value, they never truly valued you to begin with. The people who see your worth do not need constant persuasion. They do not treat you as disposable when they feel their needs are met elsewhere. It is difficult to accept that people can be transactional, but it is a truth that brings clarity. It allows you to recognize when a connection is genuine And when it is conditional, it helps you differentiate between those who appreciate you for who you are and those who only keep you around for what you provide. And once you understand this, you stop fighting for the attention of those who no longer see your presence as necessary. There is a certain freedom in accepting that you are not meant to be of service to everyone at all times. You are not obligated to keep proving your worth to people who have already decided to look elsewhere. You must learn to walk away from those who treat you as replaceable, because the ones who truly see your value will never make you feel like an option. It is important to recognize that your value is not defined by how others perceive you. Just because someone no longer acknowledges what you bring into their life does not mean you have lost it. It only means they are no longer capable of seeing it. And their inability to see your worth does not mean it is not there. When people suddenly ignore you, it is often because they believe they no longer need you. But here is what they fail to realize. Value is not something that disappears. It is something that shifts. And just as they have moved on, so can you. There will always be others who recognize what you offer. Others who appreciate the things that someone else took for granted. Your worth is not determined by the ones who walk away. It is determined by the way you carry yourself after they are gone. The more you try to chase those who have revaluated you and deemed you unnecessary, the more you lower your own sense of self. And the moment you stop seeking validation from those who have lost sight of your value, you will realize that the most important person who needs to recognize it is you. The mistake many people make is believing that if they just do more, give more, or prove more, they can reclaim their place in someone's life. But relationships that require constant justification are never real to begin with. If someone needs to be convinced to stay, they are not meant to. If someone sees you as valuable only when they need something from you, their loyalty was never real. The ones who see your worth, truly see it, will never require you to remind them of it. They will not disappear when circumstances change. They will not ignore you simply because their immediate needs have shifted. They will not make you feel like you must continuously earn their attention. And those are the only people worth keeping. And there is a peculiar thing that happens in relationships, something that often remains hidden, unnoticed, until it manifests in the form of distance, silence, and ultimately absence. It is the slow build-up of unspoken resentment. It lingers beneath the surface, invisible at first, until one day, without warning, the connection you once had with someone begins to crack. And you find yourself wondering why they suddenly started ignoring you. Resentment does not always come from betrayal or grand acts of wrongdoing. More often than not, it is born from small, unnoticed moments, things left unsaid, unresolved tensions, silent disappointments. It may be something as simple as a favor they did for you that they felt went unappreciated. It may be the way they perceived your success as a reminder of their own stagnation. It may be a joke that stung more than you realized, or an expectation they placed on you that you unknowingly failed to meet. People do not always express their resentment outright. Many lack the emotional awareness or the courage to confront their feelings. So instead of addressing the issue, they let it fester. They smile, they continue as if nothing has changed. But underneath it all, something has shifted. And when resentment is left unchecked, it turns into avoidance, withdrawal, and eventually complete disengagement. You may notice it in the way their enthusiasm fades, the way their responses become less frequent, their conversations shorter, their laughter forced. They no longer reach out first, no longer share their thoughts freely, no longer seem invested in the connection. At first, you may brush it off as busyness, a phase, something temporary, but then, one day, you realize they are gone. Not physically, but emotionally, and you are left questioning what happened. The hardest part about unspoken resentment is that you often do not see it coming, because in your mind, everything was fine. You had no idea they were holding on to something. no idea that every interaction was adding another weight to their unspoken grievances. You were living in the present while they were carrying the past. And by the time they decided to walk away, they had already convinced themselves that the distance was justified. The mistake people make is assuming that if something was truly bothering the other person, they would have said something. But not everyone knows how to communicate their disappointments. Some people would rather suffer in silence than risk confrontation. They would rather pull away than engage in uncomfortable conversations. And by the time their silence becomes noticeable, their mind is already made up. Resentment is a slow poison. It does not explode. It erodes. It does not arrive in a single moment. It accumulates over time. And when someone begins to ignore you, when they start to disappear without explanation, it is often because they have been carrying something for far longer than you realized. They have built their own narrative in their mind, convinced themselves that you failed them in some way, and instead of resolving it, they have chosen to step away. The problem is that when someone resents you silently, you are not given the opportunity to correct things, to clarify, to apologize if necessary. You are not given a chance to explain your side, to tell them that their assumptions may not be true, that their expectations may not have been fair. Instead, you are left with unanswered questions, with an absence you do not fully understand. You may try to fix it, to reach out, to ask what went wrong, but often by the time someone starts ignoring you out of resentment, they are too invested in their feelings to have an honest conversation. They have already built a wall, already decided that distance is easier than resolution, and the more you try to break through, the more resistance you will face. It is important to recognize that you are not responsible for the way others choose to process their emotions. If someone has unspoken resentment towards you, it is not always because you did something wrong. It is because they chose not to communicate when they should have. They allowed misunderstandings to grow into walls. They chose withdrawal over honesty, and that is not something you can control. People who truly value a connection do not let resentment fester. They speak, they express, they address issues before they become unfixable. They do not choose silence when a conversation could bring clarity. They do not walk away without giving you the chance to understand. And when someone does, when they choose to disappear instead of discussing what is bothering them, that says more about them than it does about you. The people who matter will not leave you wondering where you stand. They will not let unspoken resentment destroy something real. They will not ignore you over things they never had the courage to voice. And those who do, they were already gone, long before you even realized it. People change. Their lives evolve. Their needs transform. Their interests take them in new directions. What once felt important to them may no longer hold the same significance. And when that happens, when their priorities shift, so do the people they keep around. You may have once been at the center of their world, an essential part of their daily routine, but over time, that position can change without warning. It is not always personal, yet it feels deeply personal when you are the one being left behind. At first, you may not notice it. The change is subtle, a missed call here, a delayed response there. The conversations that once flowed effortlessly become shorter, less meaningful. They stop sharing the little details of their day. The enthusiasm in their voice fades. They no longer make the same effort they once did, and eventually you realize that the space you once occupied in their life has been filled by something or someone else. When people start ignoring you, it is often because they have unconsciously reprioritized their life. Maybe a new job consumes their time and energy. Maybe a new relationship has taken the space where your presence once lived. Maybe they have discovered a new passion that now demands their focus. Or maybe, without realizing it, they have simply outgrown the connection you shared. It is rarely a deliberate decision, but rather a natural shift in the way they navigate their world. This is the part that stings the most. The realization that you were not abandoned with intention, but simply forgotten in the movement of their life. It is not that they wished to hurt you. It is not that they suddenly despised you. It is just that their focus shifted elsewhere, and in the process, you became less of a priority, and that hurts in a way that words cannot fully capture. The problem is, when someone starts prioritizing other things over you, you feel the need to remind them of your presence. You reach out more. You try to engage them the way you once did, hoping they will notice, hoping they will return to the dynamic that once felt so effortless. But that is where the greatest pain lies, realizing that no matter how much effort you put in, you cannot force someone to make you a priority again. It is not always about resentment or conflict. Sometimes the connection simply fades, and no amount of holding on can bring it back to what it was. And yet, we resist this reality because we want to believe that the bonds we build are unbreakable. We want to believe that the people who once cared will always care the same way. But life does not work that way. People change, and not everyone will take you with them on their journey forward. It is difficult to accept that you can be important to someone in one chapter of their life and nearly invisible in the next. But that is the nature of human relationships. They are fluid, ever-changing, dictated by the evolving circumstances of each individual. The painful truth is that just as you have reprioritized people in your own life, so too have others done the same with you. Perhaps the hardest part is resisting the urge to chase. When someone begins to ignore you because their priorities have changed, it is tempting to fight for their attention, to remind them of the connection that once existed. But doing so only drains you, because when someone's priorities shift, no amount of effort on your part will bring them back to the place where they once held you close. The best thing you can do is recognize the reality of the situation and decide how you wish to respond. You are not obligated to remain in a position where you are no longer valued. You do not have to keep reaching out to someone who no longer makes space for you in their life. If their priorities have shifted away from you, then it is time to shift your own priorities as well. Invest in the relationships that reciprocate, in the people who make the effort, in the connections that do not require constant reminders of your worth. When people suddenly start ignoring you, it is easy to assume that something is wrong with you, that you must have done something to push them away. But sometimes it is simply a matter of life moving forward. And when that happens, the choice is not whether to hold on or let go. It is whether to allow yourself to be defined by someone else's changing priorities, or to walk away with your dignity intact, knowing that your worth was never dependent on their attention in the first place. There comes a time in life when you begin to evolve, when the things that once interested you no longer hold the same appeal, when the conversations you used to enjoy feel repetitive, and the places that once felt like home start to feel unfamiliar. Growth is an inevitable part of existence, but it is not always welcomed by those around you. Because when you change, you disrupt the expectations people have placed upon you. And when that happens, some people will choose to ignore you, not because you have wronged them, but because your growth has made them uncomfortable. People prefer familiarity. They like knowing who you are, what you stand for, how you fit into their world. It gives them a sense of security, a predictable foundation on which to build their interactions with you. But the moment you begin to change, whether through personal development, career success, a new mindset, or even just a shift in priorities, you become an inconvenience to those who are content with who you used to be. They may not say it outright, but you will see it in their actions. The way they withdraw, the way their responses become less frequent, the way they no longer seem as engaged in your conversations. At first, you may wonder if you have done something wrong, if you have somehow offended them. But the truth is much simpler. You have outgrown the version of yourself they were comfortable with, and instead of adapting to the new you, they have chosen to distance themselves. This happens in many ways. When you start pursuing a better life for yourself, whether by breaking free from old habits, setting higher standards, or seeking personal growth, there will be those who resent you for it, not because they dislike you, but because your progress forces them to reflect on their own stagnation. Your ambition highlights their complacency. Your discipline reminds them of their lack of effort. Your success becomes a silent reminder of everything they are not doing, and rather than face that reality, it is easier for them to pull away, to ignore you, to pretend you no longer fit into their world. It is not always malicious. Sometimes people distance themselves because they no longer know how to relate to you. They were comfortable with a version of you who shared their struggles, their mindset, their way of life. But when you begin to evolve beyond that, when you start speaking a different language, one of growth, one of change, one of ambition, they no longer know what to say, and instead of making the effort to grow with you, they take the easier path, they withdraw. This is why friendships fade, why relationships change, why the people you once thought would be in your life forever suddenly feel like strangers, because not everyone is meant to grow with you. Some people were only aligned with you at a specific stage of your life, and once you move beyond that stage, the connection naturally dissolves. It is painful, but it is necessary. The hardest part is realizing that you cannot shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You cannot dim your light so that others do not feel overshadowed. You cannot slow your progress just to remain relatable to those who refuse to move forward. If your growth makes someone uncomfortable, that is their burden to carry, not yours. You will notice this most when you start setting boundaries, when you begin demanding more from life. When you decide that mediocrity is no longer an option, the people who once found comfort in your struggles may no longer know how to interact with the version of you that refuses to settle. And instead of adjusting, instead of rising to meet you at your new level, they take the easier path. They step away. This is why when people suddenly start ignoring you, it is not always a reflection of something you did wrong. Sometimes it is proof that you are doing something right. You are changing, evolving, becoming more, and not everyone is ready for that. The reality is, growth is a filter. It shows you who is truly meant to be in your life and who was only there for the version of you that no longer exists. And as painful as it is to watch people fade away, it is far more painful to shrink yourself just to keep them around. Because the right people, the ones who truly value you, will never ignore you simply because you decided to become better. They will grow with you, not away from you. Silence is rarely without meaning. When people suddenly start ignoring you, it is not always a reflection of your worth, but rather an insight into their own nature, their own struggles, and their own limitations. Some will withdraw out of unspoken resentment, carrying wounds they never voiced. Others will distance themselves because their priorities have shifted, and you no longer fit into the structure of their evolving lives. Some will pull away because your growth has become an uncomfortable mirror, forcing them to confront the ways they have remained stagnant. And sometimes people disappear simply because they were never meant to stay. The mistake we make is chasing clarity where there is only avoidance, seeking closure from those who have already closed the door. We demand explanations from people who lack the courage to give them, believing that if we just try harder, we can restore what has been lost. But the truth is, when someone chooses silence, that is their answer. Their absence speaks louder than any words ever could. Not everyone is meant to stay, and not every fading connection is a loss. Some distances create space for better things to arrive. Some absences teach you the value of your own presence. And sometimes being ignored is a gift, an unspoken permission to stop waiting, stop wondering, and start moving forward with those who truly see you, truly value you, and truly belong in your life. So, do not grieve the ones who walked away. Do not chase those who have already chosen to let go. Instead, stand firm in your own worth, knowing that the right people, the ones who genuinely care, will never need to be reminded of your value. They will never make you question your place in their life. And most importantly, they will never ignore you when you needed them the most.